This is Tyler O'Neill, senior editor at The Daily Signal. I'm honored to be joined by Daniel Turner, who is the Grand Poobah president, CEO, co-founder of Power of the Future.
Yes, that sounds good.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I thought I would just have you on to talk about how the world is ending. I've heard of this thing called burning fossil fuels. It's going to destroy us all. There are fires in California. That's proof of climate change. Mm-hmm. There are hurricanes that devastated the South. That's proof of climate change. Mm-hmm. What isn't proof of climate change?
Everything is climate change, and everything is caused by humans. I thought one of the greatest examples of this level of stupidity is when former Chancellor Angela Merkel canceled her country's nuclear program because she saw the Fukushima tsunamis and said, climate change, and if we have this in Germany, devastation. And no one was brave enough to say, Chancellor, if Germany gets hit by a tsunami, we got really big problems, right? The nuclear reactors are the least. But that's the level of stupidity. When you have this climate hysteria and climate fear, rationality and common sense go out the window.
Yeah. So, if we want to be a little bit more specific, what's happening in California? Why is this not climate change?
Well, and this is just bad forest management. And quite frankly, who runs for governor to manage forests, right? I just saw you yawn, right? The forest management is a very boring subject. No offense to the forest management experts out there, but some people think energy is very boring. But yet, these are the functional things that we ask our government to do. I'm not an anarchist, right? I'm a limited government, small government conservative, but there are roles for government. And if we're going to have government-run forests, then the government needs to make sure they are clean. I got a large farm in Virginia, a couple hours away from D.C. I have dead branches, and I know if I keep them there and God forbid something happens, my land is at risk. I clear my own land. Do you remember the old pictures of Reagan and Bush? They were always clearing brush. George W. Bush, Ronald Reagan were always, because it was their land. But the governor of California doesn't want to do that. He diverts resources to sexy issues, trans issues, abortion issues, and those issues get news, they get attention, but the basic boring part of government, which is managing forests, gets ignored. And then nature kicks in, and forest fires are natural. It's not climate change that causes the forest fires, it's man that prevents it from happening. What's happening in California, sadly, is nature at its worst, and we can prevent it with good government.
Yeah. So what about hurricanes? I mean, I just went through a very big study showing that there isn't a correlation between carbon emissions and hurricanes getting worse, despite what the left always says.
Yeah.
What have you seen on that issue?
Same, and real climatologists and oceanographers, however you pronounce that word, will look at 40, 50, 100-year studies and say they aren't more frequent, they aren't more intense. Of course, the line goes up and down, but the line stretched over 100 years is pretty darn flat. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I saw recently DOGE announced that they were beginning to audit NOAA. And NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Agency, has been guilty of modifying past data sets to prove their point. I mean, that is criminal. When you go back to the 40s and 50s and you change numbers to get a more, exciting number to prove your point, that is criminal, and that's immoral, and it's unethical, and it's wrong. And so the audit of NOAA can't come soon enough, because they've manipulated hurricane data to scare the crap out of people, to get bad government policies, and mostly to get money.
Well, because I've been hearing from the left two incommensurate claims about DOGE. One is, we don't want them to get all this sensitive data. They're suing to keep them away from the data. And then the other is, we can't let them take over because they're going to delete all the reams of the important scientific data that we've collected. So I'm wondering, which is it?
Yeah, exactly. We do need honest people looking at this data, and especially archival data, and to go back into generations past and change numbers. And anyone who has done basic statistics or basic math knows that you can manipulate numbers. I do a lot of Q&A and colleges. I was at a college just earlier this week, and I always give the example. We're in a classroom, right? 6 months of the year, this classroom is 90 degrees. Awful for learning, very hot.
Yeah.
6 months of the year, this classroom is 50 degrees. Awful, really hot, terrible. You can honestly say this classroom averages a balmy 70 degrees all year. That's not a lie. But you can, but you're not telling the truth either. You're not telling the fullness of truth. You can take numbers to manipulate them any way you want if you are looking for a certain outcome. And if I want to write a brochure that says my classrooms are a balmy 70 degrees, well, that's how I manipulate the number. And our government shouldn't be doing this when the outcome is money, grift. I get, money from my agency, from my association. That type of data manipulation has to come to an end.
Well, and how much, like one of the other fascinating things about this issue, how much better concretely are our lives because of carbon emissions, because of this thing that the left constantly demonizes as saying it's dirty, it's going to cause the end of the world. But if we lost all fossil fuels tomorrow, how would we be living?
Exactly. I tell people on social media when they tell me like we need to stop oil or no more fossil fuels, I say you can't even reply to that tweet without using fossil fuels. And what we've accepted as baseline humanity is a fossil fuel abundant life. And you can say it's bad or you can say it's good, but I don't know anybody who is willing to give it up. And that's the thing that we're missing. I don't do this because I care deeply about energy I do, but I do this because I care deeply about humanity. And the most energy-rich countries are the healthiest, the cleanest, the most hygienic. They have the longest lifespan. They have the lowest infant mortality rate. They have the most human rights. They have the most rights for women and minorities, right? Energy rich. The worst countries in the world, no offense to them, have the least amount of energy. And so I run into these climate protesters and they're desperate to end fossil fuels, but they wouldn't live for a second in sub-Saharan Africa. They want to pretend they would, but they want to also Uber Eats their kale salad. The video of Ocasio-Cortez when she was coming onto the scene 8 years ago in a polar vortex in New York City in January, and she was cutting up strawberries, doing an Instagram live with her millions of viewers, bashing fossil fuels. And I thought, how sad that you're so ignorant that you can find a strawberry in New York City during a polar vortex at a price point a bartender can afford because of fossil fuels. And if you're not willing to give that up, then you have no right making energy policy that forces the rest of us to have to give it up.
What I love is seeing all the climate protesters going and having their big signs that read, stop fossil fuels, that are made with fossil fuel resources,
Exactly.
They're wearing normal shirts. And how many of the products in our shirts and our clothing are synthetic petrochemical?
But they're not doing it now because it's miserably cold outside. So no one is laying down in traffic, right? No one is blocking cars to go to the airport. They're waiting for May and June, right? No one protests climate change in the cold. It's miserable. And that's the other big lie about climate change. It's the cold that kills people. It's not the heat. The heat is annoying and it's frustrating and it's I think of every Tennessee Williams play. It's always hot, right? And they're hot and bothered because it's miserably humid. That's when the climate protesters come out. But this is what kills people is 20 degrees right now below freezing. And those are the lives that are at risk. But yeah, they can't, they take out crazy glue and stick their hands on the cement and it's all made from petrochemical products, right? Even the remover that gets them off the sidewalk is a petrochemical product and no one's giving it up anytime soon.
Yeah. Well, I think also of the, we keep being told the world is going to end, global warming, and but you look at over history, how many people are dying from extreme weather today? It should be a record high, right?
Yeah,
with
exactly.
all the rhetoric we've been hearing.
And it's fractions of a percentage. And you figure, go back to that horrible hurricane in Houston, Galveston, was it 1903 or 1905? They don't know how many died because it was 1903, but in the thousands of people died. And the reason why we have hurricanes just as bad, but why those numbers have dwindled, because we have building materials made from fossil fuels that withstand hurricanes. And we have satellites that made with fossil fuels that warn us in advance. And so fossil fuels have sustained us because the hurricanes are never going away. That's the biggest lie. The cold is going to come. The sun is going to come. Droughts are going to come. Tornadoes. The only thing we can do is try to coexist with nature and be as resilient as possible. But by reverting back to the Stone Age and caveman lifestyle, we're not standing up to nature. Nature's going to win, and that's what we saw in California. And that's brutal. To condemn your people to that for some climate agenda is evil.
Well, thank you so much for joining me, Daniel Turner.
Pleasure.
Where can people follow Power of the Future?
Powerthefuture.com or on all the socials, and it's great to be on with you. I love your outlet, so thank you.
Thanks.